guys, we are going to be reading today out of the Dear America Across the Wide and Lonesome Prairie. This is the Oregon Trail Diary of Hattie Campbell, and the setting of this was in 1847. Now, they started their journey in Boonesville, Missouri, but we call it Missouri now. The author of this was Kristiana Gregory, and she's done an awesome job of grabbing our attention and teaching us a little bit about the Oregon Trail and what the life was like as they were traveling along that journey. So I'm going to show you where they started. So they started, let me kind of readjust here. I can kind of see through it here. So they started down here. They got on the Missouri River on a steamboat, came up the Missouri River, got off at Independence. They bought their supplies. Now they did pack, in Boonesville, they packed some of their personal belongings, like their grandmother's things that was special to them, some of their, like some special things to them. Part of the reason that they have decided that they are traveling is because they had swamp fever, which swamp fever was new to me, learning about swamp fever, but swamp fever came over their family and it killed four of the children, and only 3 remain. So 4 of the girls died, 1 remains, and then 2 boys remain. So they decided they want to go west. Pa really wanted to. Ma did not so much, but they want to start a fresh start. Now, Ma's sister and her husband are also going west, so that kind of helped Ma want to go too. So they boarded a steamboat. They went to Independence. They got off here at Independence, and they bought all of their ox and wagons and all of that stuff. And then they have went all the way up this way. Now, I believe we're close to Independence Rock. Maybe past Independence Rock. We were about here. Okay, so they're about halfway. Now, they started their journey in April. They decided it was kind of a hard thing to decide when should you start to go through, because what we have learned, there was they called it the Donner Party because people would go through in groups. These guys have went through in a big group of people they don't even know, but you go through in a group with a group of people to make sure that you can help each other and just go together. And they got stuck in the mountains and they froze and died, and then some people even ate each other. So everyone is very aware. They try to be very well aware of when to go and when not to go. So the later you go, the higher risk you're going to get stuck in the mountains in the winter. So they went in April. There's been lots of heartache. There's been death. Mamas died after having babies. Poor Hattie, who was a little girl, she picked what she thought was a vegetable, and it ended up being something that actually killed kids. So there's several things that as they went along, that has been heartbreak, but then there's been some joys too. There's been like a wedding that's about ready to happen. So it's some joys too. Okay, a hot afternoon. Mrs. Anderson came over this morning as we were packing up our breakfast. She looks very thin, but there's more color in her cheeks. Oh, I think we read this last time, but I'll keep going. I can hardly look at her without wanting to cry for little Cassia. Cassia was the little girl that died after having the vegetable, that what she thought was a vegetable that she picked, and she died. She said to Ma, it was so warm last night, I think I left my shawl by your fire. Have you seen it, Augusta? Together they looked under the wagon, by the crates and the stools, then in Aunt June's wagon. I remember it was pretty blue shawl with fringe. We looked and looked. Wade is feeling good enough to dance, but when the fiddlers started up, he asked another girl. I was so upset I ran outside the circle where it was dark. For a long time, I sat in the dirt where no one could see me. Watching the dancers, I felt so alone. I want someone to love me the way Gideon loves. Mid-June. Now what we've decided, at first she would date it like April 5th, Monday, but eventually she lost track of time. So she's just saying mid-June. She's not sure what day, but mid-June. The North Platte River runs west, but now we've come to where it makes a sharp turn to the south. We must cross it in order to continue toward Oregon. Imagine our surprise to see that the Mormons not only had come and gone, but left behind 9 men to build a ferry, 2 ferries, and they would be glad to help us get across for just $1.50 per wagon. My, the arguments that broke out because of this. Tall Joe said that over his dead body would he pay 1 penny to cross a river that he saw years before Brigham Young even knew it existed. But Pa said, I think it's mighty enterprising of the Mormons to start a business in such a faraway place. Mr. and Mrs. Kinker cursed something fierce, thinking they might need to part with some of their money. Several families saw this. Several of the families said this. Those Mormons are so high and mighty they stayed on the other side of the river and wouldn't associate with us, but now they can make $1 off of it. They're friendly as can be. Come on, folks, Pa said. Brigham Young's people are trying to start a new life just like us. And I'll tell you something else. We aren't their judge. God Almighty is. And so let's just get going and not be so mad about everything. He and Uncle Tim bargained with the Mormons and 2 sacks of cornmeal and paid our passage across on rafts made from thin logs and strips of leather. Each raft, they said, could hold up to 1,800 pounds, but I don't know. Now I think this is a great time to think about how we should not judge others based off of what they believe, what they look like, what they think. We should only worry about ourselves, and they're still people. You might not believe the same thing that someone else does, but they are still people, and we still need to treat everyone with kindness. I hope you remember that in your everyday life. It felt unsteady, and water washed over my feet, and I helped Ma hold the wagon. I was so scared we'd sink. My knees ached from standing stiff. The littlest children sat safe inside the real still so the wagon wouldn't rock. Pa and Uncle Tim swam with the animals, my little brother Jake on the back of a mule. The water came up to his waist, but his fingers were hooked tight into the harness. I kept an eye on him, ready to dive in if he should slip off. Once our family and the Andersons were all safe across the deep river, I was not so nervous. It took 6 days to get everyone over. Many refused to pay the Mormons and instead forded the river without help. Except for wet belongings and scared children, everything was all right until the last day when we heard screams. That breaks my heart. I looked out, and there in the middle of the current was 2 wagons, side by side, their mules swimming hard, their big brown heads straining for breath. Somehow one of the mules drifted downstream into the other team, got in the hooves tangled with the harnesses. The poor mules panicked. Then right before our eyes, the animals began to drown. They sank so fast they pulled the wagons underwater. Before anyone had a chance to jump out, 2 families disappeared, just like that. I'm sick at heart. The screams of their friends on the shore, I will never, ever forget as long as I live. For one day, the men searched for bodies, while the last of the families came over. Meanwhile, everyone stayed busy doing regular things, almost like nothing bad had happened. Pa said that 9 Mormons will take apart the wagons to build a cabin, then stay till more pioneers come out next summer. This gave Pa and Mr. Lewis an idea. Soon enough, they had bartered wood to make a small wagon with 3 hoops. They bought a tent with the help of Mr. and Mrs. Biggs' sewing, turned the canvas into a top. They traded beans for 2 mules with harnesses and neck collars. What on earth? Asked Ma. There stood a miniature prairie schooner, about 5 long, 3 feet wide, with 1 set of wheels. Mr. Lewis grinned when he answered, "It's a wedding gift for my daughter and Gideon." Pa made friends with one of the Mormons, a man named Appleton M. Harmon, and they got to talking about something Brigham Young and his men invented on the trail to measure miles. It's called a rotometer. He drew Pa a picture in the sand, and it looks like a 4 or 5 wooden cogs attached to a wagon wheel. Somehow it works. The Mormons also have something like a thermometer that measures barometric pressure. This is how they know the altitude. That's interesting. Later, we are camped at this Sweetwater River. Oh, I'm going to show you where they were at. Here was Independence Rock. They were at the South Pass. Do you see where it was going south? So they had to pass that so they could keep going west. That might not have been right, actually. Because my next section says Independence Rock. So maybe they were right here. So we're getting ready to go to Independence Rock. From a distance, this sloped rock looks like a bear sleeping on its side. Up close, it's huge and easy to climb. Folks have been going up to the top to see the view and carve their names. Some boys raced each other up and then fire pistols in the air to celebrate. Jake asked Pa if he could have a few sticks of dynamite to throw off the top just to see what would happen. Pa thought a moment. When he said yes, Jake let out a happy yell. Pepper and I were at the river when we heard an explosion. We turned in time to see a puff of smoke floating down from the top. Some cattle took off running in fright, but were rounded up quickly by men on horseback. I don't understand why boys like such things, or why Pa thinks dynamite is safer than rifles. I don't either, do you? That's awfully silly. The wedding was late afternoon in the cool shadow of Independence Rock. Pepper was beautiful. She was barefoot with a wreath of wildflowers in her hair, and her dress seemed to float with the breeze. Gideon was so shy that when someone yelled, "Kiss the bride," he blushed redder than a sunburn and just kept holding her hand. Soon enough, there was music and dancing and food, plenty of it. Wade came up to me smiling, but instead of asking me to dance, he said, "Hattie, want to play a trick on my sister?" He led me to their new wagon. Mrs. Lewis and the ladies had made up a cozy bed with curtains for privacy. Okay, we are going to stop here today. And I'm going to be adding some links below to show you some pictures of the Independence Rock. I hope, and we'll begin later after this. I hope you enjoyed our reading so far.